AI Developer Training in .NET with Bruno Capuano.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm that serves companies using .NET technologies. We build mission-critical software, rescue troubled projects, always empowering software delivery with a proven approach. I am excited that my latest book has been getting circulated. It's about software leadership. It's called The 5 Pillars: Leadership for Effective Custom Software. The book's for anyone who's attempting to make a custom software team highly effective. And so if you want your team to deliver world-class results, then this book could be for you. And teams are also using the study guide to make their retrospective meetings and discussions very meaningful. And I'm excited about that. And if you, dear listener, would like a complimentary electronic copy of the book, just send me an email and I'd be happy to get it to you. And for those who are looking for a lead architect or software executive role, if you're in one of those roles, you might want to join our monthly forums, deeply technical sessions and interactive sessions that I enjoy facilitating. It's really a group of peers. You can sign up on clearmeasure.com. And we're also continuing to launch the new Lead Engineer live stream on youtube.com/clearmeasure. All right, so let's get into the program. I'm excited about today's guest, Bruno Capuano. He's a principal cloud advocate at Microsoft, where he empowers teams to build AI solutions with Azure using programming languages like C#, Python, and C++. His approach is to solve complex problems with minimal effort, delivering simple and efficient solutions in today's fast-paced AI landscape. He's led innovations in teams at Avanade across Canada and Europe, transforming cutting-edge technologies into practical business solutions. And he's passionate about working with teams and helping them grow and achieve high productivity, foster collaborative, positive environments. And as an interactive international speaker, he advocates for making AI accessible to everyone, empowering teams and organizations to harness its transformative potential. And outside of tech, he's a runner, a lifelong learner, and always looking for his next challenge, whether it's mastering new skills or tackling a marathon. So, Bruno, welcome to the Azure and DevOps podcast. How are you, sir?
Hey, thanks, Jeffrey. I'm fine. Just came back from a week away with family. Just in case I live in Canada, and we went to a very sunny place. Then today I get back here to our usual cold winter. It's not winter. I think we are going to start spring in a couple of days.
That's right.
So no, I'm super fine. I'm super happy also to be here. I'm really like to talk with people, meet people, and learn about the audience and more. So thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for being here. And some of the listeners may be familiar with you from your YouTube channel and all the videos that you've done on the training scene. But for those who aren't, I always like to take the guest back a little bit. Was there a turning point in your career where you said, I'm a programmer, but something changed so that now you're teaching and you're training and you're encouraging and coaching software teams? Was there a particular turning point that you can point to from just an individual programmer slinging code to the role you're doing today?
Yes, hey, that's great. So I've been in Microsoft for a couple of years, 3.5 probably, or 3.5 years. Before doing that, I work in a big consulting company doing consultancy and doing big enterprise scales and more. I was also an MVP, which is one of the most amazing experiences that I have, because I really like to talk with the community, to learn from the communities, to share with the communities. So I always have that need to learn and share while I was working. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to make the switch to Microsoft to do this full time. And hey, it's not what I expected. It's not just going from event to event, having fun with people and more. There is a lot about what are we going to do next? There are so many things happening right now. How do we choose the right audience, topic, and more? So I will say that I would like always to do this, to share knowledge, to try to put something on the table and learn with the community. But when I joined Microsoft is when I full start to do this, and I also start to learn that it's a super challenging environment. And even we are probably going to talk about AI because we all talk about AI today, and everything is happening so fast. So trying to figure out what to do next, it's super challenging. So part of my job, literally every day, is thinking, okay, if I do A, B, and C, I need to put on the table E, F, and number 1 and 2. But that this makes sense. I want to do this. What's happening in the future? So it's a lot about choices today, but it's also super, super fun. I really, really like this.
Nice. Well, you're right. So much of the conversation is about AI because it's new, it's impacting everything. And Python and some of the technologies around Python had really kind of swelled. And now you're doing a lot of training for .NET developers. For the developers out there that really haven't gotten into the space, they've used ChatGPT, they've used Copilot and various other things, but they haven't done any programming around it. What is the landscaping? And is there history around why Python is talked about a lot versus other technologies?
I mean, full disclosure here, I am going to put my age on the table. I've been programming in .NET for 20 plus years. So for the audience, you can tell that I am old. But I also did a lot of machine learning. I also did with Python and a lot of C++. And Python is amazing because it's it's a super easy language to build, to start, to prototype, to do a lot of things. So when a lot of the new machine learning frameworks in the old days, like TensorFlow, and in the new days with all of the Gen AI models that we have, like the ones in ChatGPT and more, everything used to be Python first because I think that most of the data scientists are in Python. That said, .NET also have a lot of love, and there is something on our side, I would say, that we need to also give more love to .NET developers about this. So this is why we are trying to basically every time that we show something new, it needs to be Python.NET, and we try to cover all of the bases. But yes, there is this feeling that is everything new happens in Python, and we can see even with our friends of OpenAI that they release something, a new SDK or whatever, and it's usually Python, probably later some JavaScript or whatever, and then .NET. Part of my job is to try to make this then .NET not to be so far away, to try to be at the same time, and we are working good. We are having a good advance there. We are literally having the release also in .NET, but at the same time, I try to figure out, I talk with a lot of people trying to figure out, does this make sense for us? .NET developers are usually enterprise developers. They are not working in the latest and greatest and whatever because they are maintaining, a 10-year-old system that need to do something. So how we can give them an extra value? How we can talk with these communities, with these enterprise developers, companies and more to provide this? And hey, the conversation is different. Python is usually out of the table very, very fast in those conversations. So there is a lot of layers there. But yes, I will say that if you are a .NET developer and you have the feeling that, hey, Python get all of the love, yes, we understand that and we are here to help. This is part of literally my job, is try to bring everything that we can help to the .NET devs.
Yeah, you make a great point. .NET, this kind of dominates the business community. And yeah, for a long time, it was Java and .NET, probably the first 10 years of it. And then the JavaScript frameworks it's interesting that some of the old code, like when are we going to see some of the older legacy systems be written in JavaScript? Do they have that long tenure, or does the constant churn, like on Angular, cause them to be rewritten or thrown away or just start from scratch. But that's an interesting dynamic for another show. But so you've been doing a lot of training around AI. What have you found is productive as a sequence of onboarding for people? Good .NET developers, they know C# well, they know .NET, they know all the basic .NET ecosystem, but now they're trying to answer the question, okay, how can I integrate large language models in my software? What kinds of things are ready to go now? What's the progression of getting those developers into the understanding of AI?
Hey, that's a great question. And when I do an example live demos, I usually I try to use the tools that everybody knows. Like an example, I think it was mid last year when in Windows Insider, and now I think it's everywhere. Now Notepad, literally Notepad, one of the oldest tools that exists in Windows. I can't remember the name, the number, but I think it's around 35 years old or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now have some generative AI capabilities. If you open Notepad, you will see that last year we have a huge improvement in Notepads where Notepad right now support tabs. And I know it's super silly, but I use Notepad a lot. I used to use Notepad++. I use a lot of Visual Studio Code, but then I go back to Notepad for silly things. Like an example, I copy something and I paste it in Notepad to I don't want the format, the board or whatever. And I know it's super old school. And then I copy back. But one of these days, I realized that in the top right corner in Notepad, we have this, okay, you have some text here. Do you want to make some changes to the text, make it more longer, shorter, change the tone or whatever? And I say, what? Did we add Gen AI to Notepad? And yes, the Windows
Microsoft
team did it. Yes. And hey, this is a great example that sometimes we think when we're working in our day-to-day application that, no, this is so advanced for me. This is Gen AI. This is some crazy new stuff. It's not going to fit. There are probably scenarios that they are going to help you. If someone is dealing with, an example, translations, today, the models that we have running on the cloud or running locally are very, very, very good. Literally, very, very good. And you can add multi-language capabilities to an application in a click, in a flash. They're very good. If you need to do summarization, if you need to get insight, if you work with data, everybody works with data, and you want to drop tons of data to a model and start to ask questions to the model to get insights and more, and I'm guessing that that's probably hit 99% of the people doing .NET applications, hey, there's an opportunity there. So I will say that take a look of what others are doing, and don't go for the crazy, shiny, latest, flashy, whatever, but if you need to work with data, summaries, translation, and more, the tools today are super, super mature enough to be applied at enterprise level.
Nice. So for a .NET developer who wants to start writing AI code, should they start up Azure OpenAI first? Should they have Ollama running locally? Like, what are the baby steps? What are the must-haves?
So, yes, first of all, I saw a lot of people that get, I will say scared. It's not scared, the word here. I will play notice the accent. I'm not an English speaker, born and raised in Argentina, live in Spain, moved to Canada 9 years ago. So sometimes I play my non-English speaker card. But I will say that people, get scared about, oh my God, this is so complicated. I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to create my own GPT model or whatever. And I usually advise people or try to tell people that, hey, it's not that approach. The approach is, this is a service. Literally, this is an endpoint, probably in the cloud or locally, that you are going to call to do something. That's it. So we've been doing REST calls, or back in the day, SOAP calls or whatever. We've been calling web services for years. And this is it. So if you want to start, as you mentioned, there are different ways to start. I will advise people, in example, I'm still surprised that not people are aware that GitHub, and I'm guessing that everybody have a GitHub account, GitHub provide GitHub models. GitHub models is a marketplace that you can go. If you search for GitHub models, you will find it. And you only need a GitHub account, and you will have access to the latest models that you can use. So you will have access to the OpenAI O3, O1, GPT-4, GPT-4 mini models, the Llama models, DeepSeek also is there. I don't know. There are 5 models from Microsoft Research. The most popular models are there, and you can use them for free. There is a small quota that you can use per day, so this is not going for production.
Right.
But this is great because it's an environment that will allows you to literally, with your GitHub account, you will have access to, okay, I want to start to figure out how to write this code. And you start to play around with the model. Like an example, I don't know, GPT-4, kind of old model. And today, all these months, it's not years or whatever. GPT-4 always last year.
Yeah.
But hey, GitHub model is a great place to start to write. And also it's great because you can start to play around with different models. So you can start to understand the difference between using a reasoning model like DeepSeek R1 or O3, or standard chat models or embedding models. So I will advise everyone that wants to learn to give a try to the GitHub models as a platform. Then you have the option, as you mentioned, that, hey, I want to test locally. So if you want to test locally, you have the option you can download some models to your machine and you can run them. This is big files model, a couple of gigabytes, but you can use them here. There are tools like Ollama. We are big fans of Ollama. Everybody loves Ollama. That literally is a tool that you can install in Windows, Linux, and Mac, and will allow you to basically start up a server, download any models that they have in the library. And by the way, they also have the most popular models also in Ollama, and you can run those models locally. Of course, you are not going to run a GPT model or a big crazy model that requires the cloud, but it's a great place to work locally. So there are different options there that you can do. And if you want to start and you want to have kind of an ABC steps to do this, a couple of weeks ago, we released a generative AI for beginners .NET edition course, which is a free repository in the Microsoft organization in GitHub. If you search for Gen AI for beginners.net, you will find it, which basically provides this. They provide you the step-by-step of how you can start and explain what is a GitHub model, how you can use the models, how you can also later use locally. And hey, if you build something and you want to move to the cloud, in example, the step that, okay, you just change A, B for C and you move to the cloud. But it's all there. And I will say that GitHub models, I'm still amazed that we are not promoting GitHub models enough, because it's a great place to learn about models. You can compare models, you can play around with temperature and parameters and more. It's a great platform to learn.
Yeah. Well, we will include a link to that in the show notes, github.com/Microsoft/generative-AI-4-beginners. And yeah, you got a lot of great stuff in here. And you mentioned Ollama. I've also used LM Studio for running locally on Windows. Those seem to be the two that are there, or am I just missing something? Are there a dozen of these runtimes, or they pretty much those are the two and you're going to pick one or the other?
I'm guessing that, I mean, at the end of the day, these tools, what they are doing is basically they download the model and they start a web server and they provide an interface to the model with that web server. So you go for localhost, port 11411, and then you can start to make your HTTP request there.
Yeah.
I started also with LM Studio. And I like LM Studio because you have a nice interface, UI, and more. But then I switched to Ollama. Ollama doesn't have an interface. I mean, there are third-party open source projects that provide an interface for Ollama, but Ollama is just a runtime. Right. I even run Ollama on Docker. I have a container running there because I like it in Docker locally in my machine.
Yep.
And it does everything. And I know that there are others, but we mainly focus on Ollama. Okay. And also, and again, there are different options there. So if someone finds another tool that provides that capability of download the model and host the model locally, go for it. Lucky us, we have standards today, so it's the same if you call a model with Ollama, LM Studio, or probably others.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm a big fan of Ollama. Once I get to Ollama, I stop testing other products.
Sure. Yeah. I love it too. It's great. I remember a time, and going back, I'm sure you remember this as well, where it wasn't normal for a developer to run SQL Server locally on a computer. And there was this, the shared developer SQL Server. But as machines got more powerful, the SQL Server Developer Edition or even SQL Server Express, it was no big deal. It installed just fine. It ran just fine. And having a local version of the schema with, very small, just a few records in the database, it was hugely useful to have that locally and be able to iterate quickly on code rather than having to use a shared resource. I think of the same concepts when you were talking with the different pieces of the generative AI infrastructure. We have the model file, and some of those can be multiple gigabytes and large.
Yes.
A database file could be large, but you can make it small. And then we have the model server, or I guess you call Ollama an AI server. What officially do we call it? Is it a Gen AI server?
I don't know. That's a great question. We've been talking about that the other day, that we don't have a standard whatever, the LLM host or LLM, but yes,
that's right.
It needs to be called a server.
That's right. It needs to be called an LLM server. I hereby call it, we'll see if that sticks. It needs to be called an LLM because it attaches to the file, it opens it up, it uses some RAM, but it's the process that has the endpoint. Just like SQL Server Express or SQL Server Developer Edition, it is a running process that connects to the actual database file that you can call into, but you don't use it directly. We have SQL Management Studio, or we have Azure Data Studio. Yes. That is a program that can call into it, that we can type in queries. Are they called SQL prompts? But type in queries. And just like we would have LM Studio has a UI or Open Web UI, that gives us the UI where we can type in queries to our model, those prompts. And so it seems like there's architectural parallels here where it's not 100% brand new techniques that if I want to develop locally, if I'm going to be somewhere, if I'm prepping for a trip out somewhere, I'm not going to have good internet, or if I just want to have everything on my local developer workstation, those are the pieces. And I've been doing it with the database for a long time. Okay, let me do it with this too.
Yes, no, and that's a great analogy, because at the end of the day, these servers, I like this LLM server idea, they provide this interface. There is a standard right now. The challenge a couple of years ago that you can download these models locally. You can open, if you have the right tools, these models, but those models are basically very different in Llama models versus 5 models or a DeepSeek local model. Mm-hmm. These servers, like Ollama or LM Studio, they basically add this layer on top that when you are talking, doing chat with them, you have an interface and you are going to talk with that interface. So that's amazing. That's literally what the service is doing, is giving you a level of abstraction, security, and more. And yes, when you're working locally, that's great, because sometimes you start local, and local is great to learn, to do a lot of things, and then you switch. If you are going to go big, you probably switch to the cloud. If you're going to have 1 million of requests or whatever, you can go to the cloud. So, I love the analogy of doing, if you're a .NET developer doing SQL, this is something that you can probably understand. Think about that LM Studio or Ollama or another one are basically servers that provide expose an interface to models, and you can download, you can choose your own models. That's great. I love it.
In your AI training, one of the topics is RAG and vector databases. And besides just Ollama, the LLM server, and whichever model we use, and send it some prompts, get back some things. And besides that, there's this new bit of infrastructure that a lot of developers have never used before, which is the vector database.
Yeah.
So what's the shortest way you have found to explain what the heck that is and how it relates to Gen AI?
Yeah, so the models, November 30, 2022, when OpenAI went crazy and they put ChatGPT to open the ChatGPT to the world, everybody started to realize, oh my God, I have a chat here, but this chat is kind of intelligent. You have the feeling that when you are talking and you have an answer, that model in the back, it's giving you a very, very good response, and you can have a conversation, and the quality is amazing of the conversation there. So that's amazing. That's great. But there is a problem there. The main problem is that the model that you are interacting in ChatGPT is one of the GPT models, or in Llama with one of the Llama models, or in their scenarios, they were trained with a specific set of data. So if you ask something outside of that data, they won't know what to answer. And because these models are mainly trained to answer questions, they are going to always complete the text and more. This is the moment that you start to get hallucinations and more. So in order to talk with those models with new or external set of data, there are different techniques. One of those techniques is RAG. And in a very, very short way to explain this, what we can do is store data in a database and use this large language model to talk about this. And when we ask a question and the model doesn't know the question, but maybe the answer is in the database, the model will go to the database. But, and this is what you were asking, this is not a standard keyword database where you have tables and more. This is a vector database. The main difference here is that the information is stored in the database, and there are a lot of databases, even free database that you can run locally in Docker, like Quadrant, Python, Chrome, and more, that the information is going to be stored there using vectors. And vector is basically a numerical representation of information. And when we start to ask questions using these large language models, we generate also other vectors, and we use some crazy math. It's not very complicated, but I probably need a screen to show some numbers here. But we start to use this math to try to find the answers. The super cool things about this vector database is that you can start to ask semantic queries because you have the power of the large language model plus your data in vectors, and you can start to ask questions. And in example, if in your vector database you have camping products, outdoor products, you can ask questions like, in example, hey, it's going to be rainy tomorrow. What can I use? And the answer is going to somehow find that you have in camping products a waterproof jacket, an umbrella, or something like this. And on top of that, because these models are great doing what we just talked, speaking in different languages, out of the box, if you ask the questions in other languages, Spanish, French, I don't know, other language, you will have the same answer. So vector database are they're not new, but this is the moment that we're starting to really, really get the value with them when we work with the LLM. And we also see that a lot of standard and the big database that we know are starting to add vector capabilities, like Cosmos DB is doing this, Azure SQL. I think it's in preview. I can't remember if it's in GA, but they have the chance when you add data to Azure, to a SQL database, you can define, okay, I want this data to be also stored as an embedded data, so I can later query, do some semantic search, asking natural questions. So yes, that is something that it's really, really, really changing the way that we develop an application, because we have tons of data, but instead of doing our standard queries, combos, filters, and more, we can start to ask questions, natural language questions to the data. Hey, the answers and the experience are amazing.
So, and so many people are thinking, well, if they have any kind of customer service or help section in an application, it seems like the easiest thing is, oh yeah, well, let's allow them to ask any question. Let's see if we can make it come back with useful information. So it seems like a lot of developers are working on that use case. And if I was just to ask a question, what's the price of, product ABC? Is that a good use for a vector database, or should we just be using a kernel tool with semantic kernel just to do a price lookup? How do developers think about those things?
So yes, that's a great question, because there are a couple of ways to tackle that question. So the models are also, when we say that we can connect the models to vector database, we also have techniques to connect the model to external system, which is literally what you ask. So if I have a question, like in example, how much is this cup of coffee? And the model knows that there is a third-party service that will give that information, the model may call that service and it's going to give you an answer about this. So, an example, if we want to have questions around weather, or you internally have an HR system where you have a huge database with questions, but your HR benefits are not the same that another people in another region, another country, or another level. So right now we can also have the chance to use these models that in specific scenarios, we can ask the models to call a third-party service. Like an example, give me the price of a product, as you mentioned. And that's amazing because you will have, once again, the power of the full large language model, as we saw with ChatGPT. I will always say ChatGPT because I think it's still the most popular one and people know how to work.
Everybody's
so you will
that.
have this feeling that you can talk and ask questions and more, but at the same time, in the back, the model will talk to a vector database, in example, to a third-party systems and more. And those are the scenarios that we are, in the .NET world, we are seeing that they are literally gaining a lot of traction because there are systems there. So you have your data, you have your products, you have your, your logistic system up and running for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to provide something on top of that using AI, you don't need to build everything again. If you already have a couple of endpoints with queries and more, you can have a chat doing this conversation and then the experience for the user will be great. Or if you have a logistic system right now and every Monday or every day you want to build, some kind of summary of what's happened day and day, you can even drop a lot of info to have a nightly task that drop all of this info into one of the models and you have a very, very good summary of what's happening, comparing with other days and more. So yes, the chance to connect this model with external data is something that using vector databases or functions is something that it's really, really useful for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go back to the generative AI for beginners course. This is one of the differences that we have with this course versus the other that we have in Microsoft. I think it's lesson 4. I don't have it right now, but I think lesson 4, we added literally real life scenarios. This is end-to-end application because we know in .NET, there are tutorials and more, but hey, if you want, here is a repository that uses SQL Server, a front end, a back end, a query and a semantic query, and right-click ACD app, you deploy it to Azure, you have everything there. So we have a lot of end-to-end scenarios that they are basically focusing on solving this. Hey, if you want to do something, this is the real piece of code that is going to help you how you can do this. And this is all, by the way, the latest .NET. We are using Aspire, we are using Blazor and more, but if you are running .NET 8 or 9 or 10, because we just released 10, I think it released candidate 1 or whatever.
The first preview,
you can. Yes, I think I can't remember. It's super alpha preview, I can't remember, but you can run this. So the whole idea of the generative AI course is to also provide end-to-end enterprise scenarios to do this. One thing that we are learning, and when I am going to user groups and I talk online and hear with people that a lot of people have is, they want to have a chat with your data scenario with SQL database. And I literally have one here. I'm not going to publish today because we don't deploy on Friday, but we have a scenario that is going to be released next week. That is probably when people are listening to this. That is basically that, because start to talk with a lot of .NET developers and they say, hey, my environment is front end, back end, and SQL. Give me a sample of how I can take advantage of this.
Mm-hmm.
This is the samples that we have. So yes, connecting these large language models to data literally brings a different experience, and it's amazing.
So to close up RAG, Retrieval-Augmented Generation, I forgot to define the acronym. It seems like the pattern, Retrieval-Augmented Generation, means, okay, we need to augment what's generated with something that we retrieve. If I'm listening to you correctly, we have 2 ways to retrieve additional information. One way is with information that we generate vectors for, or embeddings, and put into a vector database. And the other way is to use a tool that can call into an existing system to get data.
Yes.
Within RAG, we've got those 2 branches. Either use a tool or pull data from a vector database.
Yes, and the challenge there is that not everybody, and I think only a couple of few companies in the world, can train a model like a GPT or a Cloud 3.7 or something like this. So big models. So there are different techniques to add more information to a model. And one of the technique is fine-tuning. So in your local machine at home, you can download a very small model, in example, 5, 2, or whatever, a couple of gigabytes. And if you have your own set of data, you can kind of retrain the model. It's not retrain, but think about, we can retrain the model with our own data so the model will know that domain. That's a very good scenario. That's a very good approach. But when you have data changing, a lot of times you can't retrain the model all the time. So there are different ways to do this. And yes, as you mentioned, RAG is one when the model knows that can get some, by the way, we need to give context to the model. So the model will know that if I need to ask this question about outdoor products, this database may have the answer. So the model will call the database and give you the information. And by the way, when we get the info, we have the chance to get the source of information. So we know where the info came from, so we don't have these hallucinations, fabrications, or whatever are we calling this today. The AI world is having a whole discussion about hallucination or fabrication or the right term to define that. Once again, not an English speaker, playing my English, not English speaker card here to see what we have. In the same context, if we tell the model, hey, model, when you want to know about prices, you can call these endpoints here, and they're going to give you info. The model will get to do this. And by the way, when I say the model in example, when you run this locally, Olama is the one that make that magic between A and B and C and make the calls. When you run this on the cloud, if the model is in Azure, Azure is the one, but it's all, what I like is basically it's a standard natural language definition. We write those in C#. We say, hey, C#, this is a function that have a definition and say, provides outdoor products information. And this is a search and have an input and output and more. So it's all very descriptive. And yes, this is ways to give more information to this. And once again, I've been doing this a lot. Sorry for not explaining RAG, but I'm so used to this RAG or LLM or whatever that I always forget to explain LLM, large language model, SLM, small language model. So sorry about that.
No worries. But well, Bruno, I appreciate you coming on to the Azure and DevOps podcast and sharing with us about .NET and all the training that you're doing. And we'll include a link to those things in the show notes. Lots and lots of great videos and resources for .NET developers to get going on their generative AI development journey. But Bruno, thanks for spending some time with us. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for inviting me. And everyone, feel free to connect with me if you have an idea. If you have some feedback, we grow on feedback. So feel free to go with me and say, hey, I want to do this. And even if you are not happy with something, please share it with us because we are happy to try to do something. And once again, Jeffrey, thanks a lot for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.